It's often been said that folks with ADHD might be attracted to risky situations, the adrenaline rush, dopamine hits, all the things that come along with that. How does that play out for folks that maybe start a company? What does that look like? How can ADHD be of certain benefit, whether it comes to multitasking, trying new things, the rush of starting a new project, but also the challenges around maintaining it and other factors that might influence that process? In order to get a better look at this, I got a chance to talk to Fabian Met, who's a CTO and co-founder of Fullstack, amazing company in the Netherlands that's working on all things Kubernetes, absolutely rocking it with trainings and other resources. Fabian and I talked about his process, what it's been like from the start of his company through scaling it out. Now they're about 70 employees. I think you're going to like a lot of his insights and hope you get some great takeaways and learnings from this, as I've learned a lot in this conversation. Let's go check it out. So, one of the first people that I started talking to about ADHD and the cloud native space is our guest today. He's a wonderful person with a very active mind and also very active heart, doing lots of cool stuff in the cloud native ecosystem, calls himself a techfluencer. We'll have to dive into that. And also a Tenacious D fan, band that I have yet to see live and definitely need to, and hopefully we'll see with our guest. His name is Fabian Met. He works at Fullstack. Fabian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Good.
Again, would you like me to introduce myself?
Yes, please. Who are you? How'd you get here?
So my name is Fabian Met. I've known you, Bart, for quite a while now. It was bromance at first sight when you saw my Tenacious D performance. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Fullstack in the Netherlands. We're a cloud consultancy company, and we help companies, migrate to the next level of their IT. And I have ADHD.
Yeah.
I've been diagnosed very early on.
Okay.
But yeah, it took a long time before I was able to properly give it a place, though. Because you'll find that when you start a company, there's a lot of different things that you do, right? Rushing around, picking up all the tiny things. And that's great if you're constantly context switching, which is something that we can do a little bit easier sometimes if it has a little bit of our attention. But yeah, the bigger your company gets, the more structured you need to work, and the harder it gets to properly do that. So it's only in the last few years that I've actually been able to start dealing with that pretty well.
And okay, so with that in mind as well, you start this company, and how many people were there when you got started?
Yeah, well, just me and the other guy, Gerrit ten Boer. So It was just us two. We were still in the field, and it took us 2 years to cut the noose or the knot.
Yep.
To make the decision that we were going to hire someone. And after we hired our first, that's when we started to grow rather fast. But we've always stuck to our core principles, which I think has helped us grow so fast.
Okay. With that in mind, just curious, did he know that you had ADHD when you started working together?
I don't really remember, but there's a good chance he did.
Okay.
Because,
no, just curious. Yeah.
I'll be fidgeting and moving around a little bit more, easily distracted, but I don't really remember.
Yeah. No, but just in the sense you obviously you complement each other very well with, with the skill sets that you both have. In building out a company, though, like you said, for folks that haven't built a company, what were the things that, because being someone with ADHD, it's very passionate, a lot of energy around starting stuff. And then when you have to maintain things and you start adding policies and structure and stuff like that, I wonder how that was.
Very difficult, because in the beginning, when you're growing, as I said, you're growing really fast, from topic to topic to topic, from how do we sort out cars to how do we sort out laptops to how do we do the Wi-Fi in the office? Any kind of decision. There's a lot of things to do when you start out. And as you said, the moment you start growing and attracting people that can also pick up some of these tasks, you can start offloading those tasks to other people, which is something I've only learned last year to actually properly do, because I've always felt this need to do it myself so that I could keep showing that I was actually doing a lot of work because that's the pitfall for a lot of small things. When you're in a meeting and talking about what you've done all week, you're not going to list out 50 tiny things, but you have done 50 tiny things. So then it's very difficult to get across to your other coworkers, say, what have you done all week? So I found now that I'm really good at starting something up. So we'll start a new business model that needs something of a backend in processes. I'll pour my knowledge into all the tick boxes that we need, and then I'll hand it off to somebody that's really good at, sorting out the processes around it afterwards and making it better. Say, for instance, we recently got our ISO certificate, 2 of them. I did the actual track. I can tell you, as somebody with ADHD, going over 50 plus Excel and Word documents, not the best fit, but I did it. But I also really quickly learned that it's better to ask someone else to then continue doing that, because I will forget all the tiny things.
I think that's a really good point too, because I'm very aware of the things that I'm bad at, or I hope I am. And if I'm not, for all the people who have to suffer working with me, please tell me the other things I need to improve. But I think that's a really good thing to anticipate. Unfortunately, sometimes you do have to have those, looking at Excels and things of that nature. But as much as possible, it's not that you're trying to avoid it. As you say, there's got to be someone who's going to do this better than me. And then I can focus on the things where I'm going to add more value. That's something that I've learned over time, and often, try to build the projects that I work on with other people who I know can fill those gaps. And I'm very happy to pay them as well as I possibly can, because I really appreciate the work that they do that I know that I can't. I think, one of the things about ADHD, and I think you'll agree, is that it seems to be, I don't have exact data on this, so I don't want to get in trouble, but that it's quite common amongst people that are entrepreneurs. What do you think about that? Why is that?
I find that when I'm most distracted, I will have insane ideas about technology is going to go this way. We need to look into that. Or we need this gap filled in our knowledge. Things I'll never think about before will just pop up. And I think it's that all over the place, but still focusing on, automatically focusing on what matters in the bigger picture, helps you come up with these ideas that otherwise wouldn't come up.
I think I would tend to agree that naturally being inclined to be involved in too many things, which is also dangerous in the sense of burnout, but maybe too many things isn't the right thing to say. Having a diverse range of activities gives you different sources of stimuli that then I think some folks might not see the connection that it will then influence other areas. But for a lot of ADHD folks, it's not difficult to connect things that seem completely disconnected. And that kind of creativity, it's something that makes me think a lot now. And I haven't never used, Chat GPT, for example, but this idea that it's going to be, or that it's, a substitute for creativity, or that I can, jumpstart certain things to give people ideas. I think that's great, but I'm not going to say that, I'm the most creative person in the world, but I don't see it as like a threat to the natural human creativity of putting these different things together. What do you think about that?
So ask me to write a blog, and I'll find that very difficult unless I take my medication, because I know what I want to say. I know what I'm passionate about, but the structure of sitting down, making an index, making the headers, what do I name this header? What do I put where, etc. That's something to get started with. I find really difficult. But if you ask something like ChatGPT, hey, write me an outline for something that goes along these lines, at least you have a start, and you can use that to fill in the proper information with your own mind. So I think you can use it to get over that bump of initially starting one of those tasks, but don't rely on it as the sole answer, because it has been known to give quite some wrong answers as well.
That's a good point. And the very fact that, how much work it actually does for somebody is one thing. Maybe perhaps it's more the feeling that I know I have an external tool that's helping me out in terms of support. So I think there's something to be said for that. Going back to the notion, though, of entrepreneurs with ADHD, what are some of the characteristics that you think are found there? And I want to touch on a topic that is quite often discussed, when putting out the first post about this podcast. a fair amount of folks responding, and the notion of ADHD being a superpower, or other folks will say, that has to be taken with a grain of salt, or have to be careful because of the downsides that ADHD can have. How do you see that within the context of people that are entrepreneurs?
So regarding superpowers, right? Let's define that for a second. One of the things that people always talk about then is the hyperfocus bit, where it's very easy to lose a day when you're really, really focused on something. You don't actually get distracted, which is why I find the term ADHD or ADD really wrong, right? Deficit is not you don't have a deficit for attention, because you can have this hyper focus on one topic. But people will see that as a benefit and go like, I wish I had that. You're missing out on all the bad things that happen as well. So one of the most difficult things I find, specifically from other people, is they'll see the pluses, they won't see the minuses, and they'll judge you for not being able to, for instance, write an email. I sometimes have these emails that I keep postponing. Unless I take my meds, then I'll be able to do it. But if I don't take my meds, I'll be postponing, because it almost physically hurts to get started. You can't explain this to somebody who doesn't have this deficit in their brain, that it is so difficult to get started on one of those very mundane tasks. That is a real big downside. And that doesn't really help in the entrepreneurship, because you have to send those emails. On the other hand, you do get some pluses, like some people have the possibility of getting into this hyperfocus. I also know not everybody with ADHD has this. So you'll see people glorifying it as a superpower, which it's not. But I also don't think it's so negative as some other people make it out to be. My brain doesn't work the same as your brain, even though we might both have a specific, what do you call it in English?
Love for tenacious D.
Love for tenacious D, exactly. Right. My brain won't be the same as somebody else with ADHD or ADD, because you'll always have a separate implementation, basically, of it. However, the most difficult part with entrepreneurship is making sure that you still do the mundane tasks, make sure you know what you're really good at and what you're not good at, and start outsourcing the things you're not good at to people that are.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I think once again, having a clear idea of, and in the beginning, unfortunately, you can't outsource everything, for a lot of different reasons. And so you just have to sort of get through that. I think an important point to touch on here for non-ADHD folks, as well as for ADHD folks, is the dopamine factor. That
yes,
when in other brains, sending that email or things like that will give a sort of rush of like, oh, I've completed this, and I've done my task. And in lots of neurodivergent brains or ADHD ones, that's not necessarily the case. And so even if you do the task, you'll have the relief that it's done, but not necessarily the same feeling. Once again, this is completely case by case. But I've suffered from those things of it just dragging out, sending an email that at the end of the day was going to take me 15 minutes. I would do absolutely everything to not do it, even though it's having a negative impact on my business, on my relationships with customers, all those kinds of things. And in my case, what's been helpful is having someone who I work with who is very aware of all my we can say shortcomings and things that I don't do as well as I'd like to, and is very helpful at that. And so one thing that we do or started doing recently is what's called body doubling. So it's like, all right, I have all the tasks that I really don't want to do, but I have to get them all together and I have to get them done. And he can help me out with some of these things in the sense of like, okay, it was like, he'll say, look, I'll even write the email for you. You just need to copy and paste it and send it. But like I said, it's a bit of a luxury, to be honest. But with other things where I have to do it and he can't, it's like, okay, we'll have this block of time where I'm going to do it. And he's there, not physically with me, and not even necessarily, we can be on a call, but we're not talking. But it's a way to keep me on task and to make sure that those things that do need to be done, that they get done. And that's been beneficial. I don't know if you have any tricks or things that you use to get these out of the way. I know you mentioned medication, which does help because you don't have that feeling of suffering, or that is like, that I just really don't want to do this, it makes it easier to concentrate and focus on something that you don't necessarily enjoy. But has there been anything for you over time that's been beneficial for organizing your tasks or making sure that you're getting to all these things?
So first on organizing my tasks, I have had 1,500 different to-do list apps, paid for premium on all of them, and then decided, oh, it's still not what I want to use.
Yeah.
So I found that blocking specific parts in my calendar to do a specific thing don't work, because for some reason, even though if it's still myself, I say I'm going to spend this hour writing this blog or doing this thing, the hour will come and I'll be in dread going, fuck, I really don't want to do this. So instead, what I've done now is just pick the latest to-do list, and it doesn't matter which one, just as long as you can easily add tasks. For me, at least, that works for now, because this can change next week.
Yep.
And I'll just write the tasks in short, broken down tasks that I would like to complete today. I don't judge myself if I don't make them all. I just make sure that I've got some tasks to do, so that when the time comes and I finish one task, I can pick which of the tasks I would rather do. Now, then you still get to that one task that you might be postponing. So if you've postponed that 3 days, maybe you need to put that up a little bit more on the priority list. But because I'm not specifically saying I'm going to start this at 11, and just have a more fluid set of to-dos that I do during the day, I find that helps with organizing. I know about the body doubling. I haven't actually had or used that. I did hear somebody using a camera for that. So there was a YouTuber, and he used a camera, pointed it at himself, and used that to basically body double. And he would talk into the camera as if he was broadcasting. So that might be something that people could try if trying to find someone to body double with all the time is difficult.
Yeah.
And usually your spouse won't like it that much either after a week.
No. I mean, depending on the task and how much time, because that's the thing, it is a bit of an ask. And in this case, I pay this person for lots of other projects that we're working on as well, but like, he's very aware of this and knows that it's best for everybody, that I'm going to have some stuff that I really need to do and I got to get through it. With what you said as well too about the to-do list and the apps and things like that, shout out to Evernote for getting free money from me for a yearly subscription that I'm not using at all. But, and it's very common. And so I think the main thing, like you said, is a really good point that you mentioned, is that you're probably not going to get to all of your tasks, and that's totally okay. Is just that you have them visible and that they're there and that you are making progress. So give yourself for the stuff that you're doing, rather than just beating yourself up for the ridiculously high expectations that I think happen with a lot of folks with ADHD. At least in my case, like, no, I want to be normal. I see this really organized person and I want to be like them. I'm never going to be like them. I'm always going to be me. I can be a better version of me. But to put such a high standard that you're not going to reach, and then another downside with folks with ADHD, once again, the exact data on this is not my thing, but low self-esteem and a tendency to be really hard on yourself. And that's not, it can drive you to be better, but it can make it very painful in the process. And so that's been one of the things that I've learned, and that I've repeated a lot, is that for people that are starting out with their diagnosis, maybe you can talk about this as well, because every case is different. Mine's only 1 year in, but that it's a lifelong process, and you have to be kind to yourself. So build whatever you have to do to build kindness, do it, because if you don't have that part in there, the rest is going to get really, really hard, because not everything's going to work exactly how you like to. Your habits, whatever medication you're taking, like all those different things, that's a lengthy process, and it's going to be on the go. And so in order to do that without suffering too much, I think it's really important to build kindness in there. But anyway, tell me more about your process, how that got started, and how you see it now with the experience that you've had.
Yeah, so I got diagnosed when I was, I think, 14 or 15 or something like that. Back then, the tests were good, so they were correct in the diagnosis. But the school system couldn't do anything with it. Basically, their answer was, okay, yeah, so he has it, whatever. Can't really do anything with it. So I failed 2 years of school because I couldn't get to homework, no matter how hard I tried, because I didn't find it interesting. Nowadays, though, people in my vicinity have been diagnosed as children or as adults, and they've been able to get much more proper help, not only in just medication, but also some actual psychology on self-acceptance. Like you said, because you need to be kind to yourself. That's the one thing that we find very difficult, because we keep judging ourselves, while we really should be kind to ourselves, because you're never going to change. And if I can just do one shout out to everybody listening to this who has ADHD or has ADD, it's very simple. You're not going to change. Taking medication is not going to change you. The only thing you really need to do, and that takes time and effort, is be content with yourself and accept yourself for who you are. Because first it starts with acceptance, accepting that you are not the same as somebody else. But then again, that person is not the same as their neighbor, etc., etc. Everybody's different in some way. We have a tendency to judge ourselves because we're very, very aware of all the things happening. So you'll see things happening that other people don't see, and you'll judge yourself for it. If it's something that you're doing, then you'll be harshest on yourself. But the biggest thing you need to learn is that you're the only one judging yourself for that. Nobody else is. So start with self-acceptance. You're not going to change, and you don't need to change. The more happy you are with yourself, the easier it becomes to properly set priorities. So what I do now is I have a, what do you call it? A square.
Okay.
And in a square, I can, it's 4 squares. It's a grid, sorry. It's a grid with 4 squares.
Everyone, a grid is a square with 4 squares. You heard it here first.
In this case, yeah. Whenever I'm not sure whether or not I'm doing something for the right reasons, I'll write it down, because each square represents a different part. I won't get into the details. Basically, it boils down to this following question. Am I doing the following thing that I am doing because I feel uncomfortable and I want to alleviate that uncomfortable feeling? Or am I doing it because it helps something that I find really important? Am I doing something to make my work easier because I like my work easier? Or am I doing it because I feel uncomfortable that I might not be showing enough, so I'll make my work easier so I can pick up more work? Same thing that you can do, 2 different reasons why you can do it. And I'll try to nowadays always relate things I do to the things I find important, which then makes it a lot easier to find motivation to get started on those things.
I really like that. And that's something that I only started exploring, not in that way, but in August of last year, looking at, my partner is a teacher. So we always look at the years, in school years, September to June. And so in August of thinking about, okay, I need to change how I work because it's just absolutely crazy and it's, it's too much and I'm not setting limits and I'm, people pleaser. So always saying yes to things without thinking about what I'm saying yes to and things of that nature. And generally just not having, self-care is a word that's used a lot, but it's, just not taking care of myself properly. And then getting angry and it's like, well, but what have you done to actually make that better? And what I looked at first is that I made this, because another ADHD thing in my case, lists. I love making lists. There's some like stress relief of creating very large lists at all times of all these different things. But I created a very, very long list, like a document, probably about, 5 or 6 pages, about how I want it to work. And so really drilling down is like, I'm going to use this app, these tools, this, that, and all these different things. And then doing it, I came to the realization, why don't I start previously with about how I want to live? And then that can inform how I want to work. Because if it's just about work, then yeah, there are certain things, optimization, things like that. But thinking in a deeper sense is like, shouldn't your life come first? And that should be informing the other aspects. And so what you mentioned right there is like understanding if you have true motivations that generally will come from your values. So if you feel like your values are present at work, and I know that for some people, they find those exercises to look at values like kind of silly or things like that, but I think it's a really good thing to do. And no 2 people have it. Well, I mean, they might have similar values, but values all come from different places and we define them in different ways and they manifest themselves in different elements in our lives. But I really think, like I said, that that what you said is, thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. What's the purpose behind it? Because if you don't feel that purpose, it's probably not going to make you feel very motivated. And that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, if you don't think about it, then you'll fall back into the default of acting out of uncomfortableness. I feel uncomfortable with this email. I will wait for that uncomfortable feeling to be at the max the day before I actually really need to send something in. And then I will send it in. I will have had 2-3 weeks of stress. And all I've been doing has been around this uncomfortable feeling. And this can be at work, this can be at home, this can be anywhere. And if you're not actively thinking about what value is this supporting of mine that I find important, you'll very easily fall back into the autopilot of just working off your uncomfortable feelings, which is what we do. Another great motivator for people with ADHD and ADD is, I believe, the chemicals called cortisol, the stress hormone, because we feel stressed. I really need to send in this paper, and I will write it the evening before I have to send it in the morning. And it'll be an awesome paper, but I will have had stress for 4 weeks for no reason. Now, though, if you actively try to do this, it might sound silly at first, right? Okay, I want to write this paper. Why do I want to write this paper? Do I want to write it for good reasons or bad reasons? And it could be both, but you want to focus on the good reasons. I'm doing this so I can help educate people, which is something I personally find very fulfilling. Or really anything that supports your values, even just actively thinking about it makes it easier. No matter how silly it seems, you should really give it a shot for a bit before you don't.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think so many folks out there, and it's not their fault, but just like kind of go through the motions and just assume like, oh, like this is just how everybody does it. And there may be some truth to that, but it's like, does it have to be that way? Does it absolutely have to? And like you said, sometimes it doesn't mean that every single thing you do is going to align perfectly with your values. But if you do a little bit of digging and you think about it, it's always like, okay, I want to get a better job. Why? To make more money. Why? Like, what is it that you're really looking for? At the end of the day, it's probably peace, comfort, security, these sorts of basic things, but understanding, that those are the reasons that are, driving your actions. To take a little bit of time to think about it is something that I think a lot of people don't give themselves the luxury of. And it, with a little bit, goes a very, very long way. Now let's keep changing subjects. So something that we have talked about with other folks, or at least in my case has come up, is the fact that in a lot of cases, the ADHD can be hereditary and that there's a genetic influence there. And so from talking to different family members, and I'll use this one because he's no longer with us on this planet, but my grandfather, massive shout out to him, huge influence on me and an amazing person, is that from looking at a psychological evaluation, because in the past, human resources would get a psychologist to interview somebody when they were in a job application process in the U.S. in my grandpa's time. So this was in like the 1940s or 1950s. And a lot of the characteristics that they said about him, I felt like I was like reading a description of me, in the sense of needs to be given his space to do his work, changes in temperament. I mean, like lots of things that aligned very like way too well, and even, with a massive generational gap and like all that kind of stuff. In your cases, or been anything that you've noticed with other family members that's come up that maybe has helped you learn a little bit more about yourself or other aspects?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So my wife got diagnosed, I think last year, something like that. So very late in life, at least not in her childhood. Which helped explain a lot. Also why we have a rather good relationship, because we're both crazy. Now, that was a joke. I don't think we're really crazy, for the people out there. But we do fit together well. But yeah, it's very hereditary. So it turns out my daughter, who was having some issues, also got the diagnosis. And I've looked at my parents. I won't shout out to them because they might actually listen to this and not agree. But I'm pretty sure one of them also has it.
Okay. And Obviously, like you said, with the, schools being different now, there are some different things that are out there, and it's different in every country. And so that's what's interesting
Mm-hmm.
as well about this podcast is like, it's not everybody just in one place or another. And also because my partner is a teacher and has worked with special education, I've been exposed to some of the things that are available and some of the different cases, but it is really different in every country.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything with that in mind, is there anything unique to Holland that you think stands out compared to maybe what you've heard about other places, or not so much?
Well, so first of all, it differs greatly from school to school. There's still schools in the Netherlands that don't do it well. There's schools that do it really well. I'm lucky to have found a school that does it really well. They give a lot of attention and a lot of, they really work with us in trying to find the best solutions instead of against us. I know the school I went to years ago didn't. So they might do now, but it changes not even from country to country. It can change from one to the other school, which might be 2 kilometers apart from each other. If you are in a situation that you have a child that might have ADD or ADHD, I highly recommend to find a school that knows a little bit about it or is open to discussion, because you don't want to put your child through a school that doesn't.
Yeah, that's a great point.
If you have the luxury that you can.
Yeah, sometimes that's not the case, but at least know what you should expect, like what to expect. Because if you can't get that kind of help and support at that particular school, then you want to consider other options of, outside assistance and things of that nature. So I think that's really good. And most of all, as well, for people to get informed, are there any resources that have been helpful for you, whether it's articles, books, podcasts, anything like that, regarding ADHD?
So I only really started researching what it was, I think a year or two ago, or a year ago, I forget. But only a little while ago, I started really researching. I found some YouTubers. I found there was a biological something that knows a lot about the biology in the brain. So that was really insightful. But just the regular research already, just looking up, so I can't really remember specific names. I just remember that when you start looking into what is ADHD or ADD, you'll find so much information that will either make you go, oh, wait, that explains it, or just give you more insight into why something's happening. So nothing specific, but please do your research however you feel comfortable. I feel comfortable watching some YouTube videos of people that have it or that really dig into what it is very specifically. But in general, just do some actual research into what it is, because there's still people out there that think it's just that busy kid in the back of the classroom.
Absolutely. Which it's absolutely not. And I think, to go back to that topic, I've interviewed a couple of women for this podcast, and the experience that women or young girls go through is completely different, because it's like, oh, is ADHD is just like the boy who doesn't want to sit down. And so the girl, absolutely not. It's like, no, that's not true at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, I definitely hear you on that. Now, let's get to something completely different. Let's just talk about random things. So, well, this isn't totally random because we did say we're going to do this. You're a big fan of Tenacious D. Why is that? How'd that happen?
I like the style that he sings in, because it's not so serious, but he has a really, really great voice. I just like their music, started singing along. I like the silly lyrics. And then, I grew up with a lot of metal and rock. And this is a great match between metal and rock music and my general silliness.
I agree. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but it's like if you took Monty Python and mixed it into a metal band or something of that nature, like just
maybe something.
Doesn't take itself very seriously, has wonderful influences from rock stars, from, it doesn't matter if it's Meatloaf or, there's a lot of different things that you can see through Jack Black's humor. And I really, really hope that I'm able to see them at some point. Now, let's change the subject again. I know that you like role-playing games. What's your favorite video game?
It changes from time to time. So I'm looking.
Don't avoid the question.
I'm not. It just changes. I'm not currently. It's World of Warcraft again, because I made the horrible decision of installing it. But I do limit myself to how much I play, so I don't get into that hardcore grind anymore, and I don't want that anymore. It's a game, not a job. So I just do it for fun a bit. I want to try out Atomic Heart. Yeah, just basically anything that comes out, I'll be interested in, and I'll see if I get the time to actually play it, because that's the biggest challenge.
Okay. If you had to start another company of any kind, right, not necessarily a tech one, what would it be?
Jesus. Yeah, I've got too many ideas.
I know. That's why I want to hear them.
Oh, yeah, there's a few product ideas that I have that would be interesting to explore what that would be like. I've had thoughts of starting a YouTube channel where I learn myself blacksmithing. Right.
Yeah.
So something like that. Yeah, the thing is, since I'm one of the directors at my company, I can also put some of my ideas in there, so it doesn't hold me back.
I think that's a really nice thing for like with having an outlet, having a space where you know that you can have creative control and be able to experiment in a way where it's not a massive risk, and you can kind of mitigate that and see, okay, let's do a proof of concept, let's see how this is going to work or that's going to work. And in my case, it's somewhat similar, where it's like, okay, like I know I don't mind if I mean, at a much lower scale. Like, for example, next week, this won't come out on time, but I'm organizing a party to celebrate the 25th anniversary of The Big Lebowski, the movie. So it's something that I can do now because I have the right elements and ingredients and different people that I can work with. And it's not something I don't want to like, have a business based on that, but it's something that if I can cover costs or not lose that much money, it's like, oh, fun side project, let's go do this. And, it involves some headaches and organizing things, whatever, and logistics, but things like that. And then another thing that I'm working on is I want to start my own hot sauce brand. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Really?
Yeah. Because I have a friend who's got a machine. He makes natural juices. And with the same machines that you can use to make juice, you can also use to make hot sauce. So that I have a friend who's a cook. And so, yeah, these things are just fun because it's like relatively low weight, or at least it seems like that in the beginning. In terms of like, no, it's going to be really easy. And then after a while, it's not so easy.
Famous last words.
Yeah, famous last words. But I'm looking forward to getting that going. But it's something that I really enjoy talking to folks with ADHD because, once again, always thinking about different possibilities and things that can happen here and happen there. And I find that to be very fun and engaging. Last but not least, what have we missed in this conversation? Is there something that we haven't touched on that you think we should? Any messages you want to have out there? Any advice you'd like to give to people with ADHD or also their family members, their coworkers, anything like that?
So I talked about accepting yourself. It's very difficult to get other people to accept you. So if I can be very blunt, fuck them. You should make sure that you're comfortable with yourself and surround people with people. You should surround yourself with people that can accept you for who you are. That's one piece of advice, rather rough, but still. And another piece of advice is one of the trademarks of people with ADHD and ADD is that we have very short working memory. Think of it like RAM, right? I will have 15 ideas in a minute, but I'll be able to retain 5. And then I'll beat myself up for forgetting 10 because I remember I had 15 or something along those lines, but I'll forget 10. So even though I've tried so many different to-do lists, so many different documentation tools, pick any of them, stick with them for a bit, and anytime, make sure that it's a tool that easily adds you either from your phone or with a key command on your laptop, easily add a task. Because one of our pitfalls is that we have these ideas, which are usually good or bad ideas, but they're out there, and then you forget about them, but you remember that you had them. So write them down as fast as you can. It doesn't matter if you use a book or a tool or anything, just make sure it's easily accessible. That's the key. Whenever you have an idea or you need to do something or somebody asks you at the coffee machine, hey, could you do this for me? Just immediately write it down. Don't even think about it. Don't go like, oh yeah, I'll remember that when I get up the stairs to my office, because you won't. Just accept that for what it is and make it easy for yourself to just write it down. So this short working memory is something that you can't change. You can't change it with medicine either. It won't help you retain this information. Medicine, if you get the right dosage, in my case, helps me press that start button to get started on a task, right? But the actual advice I'm trying to keep doing myself now, even though I still sometimes forget, is Anytime something comes up, immediately write it down.
I agree. I mean, I definitely believe in that. I have, chats on my phone, like with myself, so that I can put, different ideas related to different things in the right place. Whether it's documents, find the thing that's going to work for you, and maybe that'll change as well. That you'll move from one thing to another. But
Yeah.
I think it's good because it creates, when you jump from idea to idea so quickly, you're like, well, I'm like 7 ideas away from the first one that I had. No, I can't remember what was it. And it gets frustrating. Then once again, if you have a tendency to be hard on yourself, then it's like, oh, you idiot, you can't do anything correctly and all those things. It's not healthy. So I think that's very sound advice. Fabian, this was amazing. I knew it was going to be amazing, and you delivered. So as usual, I thank you for that. Look forward to seeing you soon in your country in not too long. I'm excited for that. That's going to be good. Karaoke, I think, is going to be happening as well.
Hell yes.
Yes, karaoke is going to be happening, and it's going to be good. So thanks so much for joining the podcast today, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for having me. See you
Pleasure.
soon.
Cheers.
Bye.